Hello and welcome to Nat Chat. I'm Mirella Rich. Today our guest is Daniel Attard, who works as a Senior Policy Advisor for the Victorian Department of Health and Human Services. Welcome to the program, Daniel.
Thank you.
Nice to have you. Yeah, it's good to have you back again.
Absolutely.
And last week we talked all about your work in as your job as Senior Policy Advisor. And now we want to know about the person Daniel. So you were in the seminary for 2 years. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was in the Corpus Christi Seminary, which is the seminary for basically the 4 dioceses in Victoria as well as Tasmania. So I was studying for the Archdiocese of Melbourne under still the current Archbishop Hart. So that was in 2004 and 5. I was there for a full 2 years, and it was a great experience. So basically it was very heavy academically, particularly the first few years loaded with tertiary level study, typically in philosophy, but you do start going into theology in the later years. But academically it was challenging, but it was spiritually rewarding, and it was a great experience. I sort of came to the conclusion that it wasn't the vocation for me, but certainly it's not an experience I regret, and it was good to explore that vocational side of my life.
Yeah. My brother's currently in the seminary as well. He just became a deacon just recently, and he also talks about lots and lots of studying, lots and lots of work, and learning English, learning Greek and Latin as well. You learn other languages as well.
Yeah, absolutely. In the first year it was quite intense with Latin, and I continued with it for following 4 years even after I left the seminary. It does nothing to do with the seminary as such, but Latin does build a very good grammatical base for English speakers. Actually, I never really appreciated just how much English feeds directly off Latin, as well as the other Romance languages. Typically people think about Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Romanian as the typical what they call Romance languages, feeding off Latin. But certainly English, when it comes to grammatical correct grammar and even just the vocabulary, how much of it feeds directly out of the Latin language is quite a surprise.
And when you were in the seminary, was there a point where you just came to realise that you weren't going to become a priest? You didn't feel like that was meant to be your vocation? Yeah,
when I for the few years before I went into the seminary, I explored when I came to a conclusion that the priesthood was a possible vocation for me, I then started exploring, do I want to be what they call a diocesan priest, which is where you serve a particular diocese. In this case, it was Melbourne. So you're in a more, for want of a better term, a geographical area. Or did I want to be a religious priest? So most of the common ones are the common orders are Jesuits, Dominicans, Franciscans. But I settled that I did consider a religious vocation, specifically the Dominican order, because I do like the academic study side of whether it's a priesthood or just in general secular life. But I decided to go into the diocesan seminary, and so I suppose halfway through the final year I started thinking about, am I on the right trajectory? Do I think that I'm doing what I should be doing, or am supposed to be doing in my life? And I sort of came to the conclusion that I'll take a year break, so to speak, from seminary life and sort of take stock of where my life was, where I was headed. And within that year, pretty early on, I must say, I sort of came to the conclusion that it wasn't the specific vocation for me, that I was going to aim for married life, so to speak. And fast forward 10 years and that's where we are. We're married I've been married for 9 years now, and 4 children later, my wife and I are going on a typical journey.
Beautiful. You're a lovely wife and 4 beautiful children.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you're doing great. And you've also fostered children as well in your life.
Yeah, so fostering was, a lot of people say, well, why would you foster if you have children already? And fostering children while you have children of your own can typically, and it's quite a surprise to people when I say this, can typically make the process of fostering children, particularly children that are age 3 or older, typically between the ages of 3 and 7, having children in the house already that are biologically yours really helps the transition in period for the foster children, because they see you have a connection with other children in your house, in your life, and they see those children trust you as an adult, as a guardian, as a parent, and they have this assumption in their mind that these children think you're trustworthy, therefore I will find you trustworthy. And you can use that as a platform to, particularly for longer term placements, you can use that as a platform for building up a relationship with those same foster children.
Wow, and how many children have you fostered?
So my wife and I fostered for a little over a year, and typically they were shorter, what they call respite placements, so other foster children that needed, where foster parents needed a break from the foster children, and we all need a break, so we would take the children sometimes just over a weekend, sometimes it would be a week, 2, 4 weeks, but we started having children longer term, i.e. 4 to 6 months or even longer. And so they all have their challenges. It's quite often actually the respite placements pose a greater challenge than the longer term placements, because the children themselves know that they're only with you for a week, a weekend, a couple of weeks. So they don't try to have that bond. They just basically there to survive, for want of a better term. And it's an unfortunate reality of the foster care system where a lot of these children, even so young as 2, are just in a survival mode, almost a permanent survival mode, until they can get into a loving family and a longer term placement that we can start bringing that sense of normalcy and stability to their lives. But that's a problem that's the foster care system, the foster care systems right across the country face. It's that challenge of getting them into families that that provide that loving, nurturing environment that replicates the biological relationship the best.
Well, we'll just go to a break, but we'll continue. You're watching Nat Chat. I hope you're enjoying the program. We'll see you again very shortly. Hello and welcome back to Nat Chat. I'm Mirella Rich. We're here with Daniel Attard, who is a Senior Policy Advisor for the Victorian Department of Health and Human Services, and we're talking a little bit about his own personal life and adventures. Welcome back to the program, Daniel.
Thank you.
And also, we're talking about how you fostered children as well, and then you were talking about the actual foster care system where there are 2-year-olds in survival mode. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Okay, so just quickly, as you said, I do work for the Department of Health and Human Services, and it's a rather unique perspective having fostered children myself together with my wife, as well as being on the other side of the bench, so to speak, and seeing how policies are drafted from the department side. So the Department of Health and Human Services for Victoria are the ones that govern the foster and permanent care systems throughout the state of Victoria. So but a sad thing is that the department, and this is just through lack of experience, I don't think it's through a lack of will or a lack of love or care for the children, the that survival mode or tackling those sort of issues really isn't reflected in, from my perspective and from what I take from it, reflected in the systems that we have at the moment. There are so many challenges and so many complexities in the system that often the children fall through the cracks. So, but to go to your question about what I mean by survival mode, a lot of these children, basically from the day they're born, that are in the foster care system have been neglected. That's why they're in the foster care system. Then they're not in there because they come from stable, loving homes. So, but they just retreat almost to, and I don't mean this in a derogatory sense, almost like an animal in a way that they fulfill the basic needs of life: food, water, and shelter, basically. And so I'm aware of cases where children as young as 2 and 3 have done things that you can see why they've done it, but in reality doesn't make much sense. And what I mean by that is they've gone to, say, the kitchen of the foster home that they've been in the middle of the night. They've just woken up and they'll take food products from the kitchen and stuff it under their pillow, put it under their mattress, hide it in their pantry, and things like a tin of tomato paste or a packet of raw pasta, things that in reality they can't eat on their own. It's not as if it's a muesli bar or a chocolate bar, but you can see that that's, again, I use that term, that survival mode, that I don't know, from their perspective, they say to themselves, I don't know where my next meal is coming from. I don't know how long I'm going to be here for.
It's so heartbreaking. I'm going to bawl out.
It is incredibly disheartening. It's the people that I've known, other foster carers, and the stories that my wife and I have shared with other foster carers, where you hear of these stories where even the children themselves talk about how the places they've stayed in, the people they've stayed with, the abuse or neglect they've experienced, and it's just so raw, and they don't go to any length to dress it up because it's just not in that that infant mentality they have. And often they are so mature beyond their years. Again, to illustrate it with another example, I've known a 4-year-old that literally put apples in a grill just to soften them up so she could feed them to the baby, because the parents were so what we call chronically absent. So, and this is a 4-year-old thinking about that now. I don't think my children would have that at the age of 4 would have had that, and nor should they. I don't think a 4-year-old should have that cognitive capacity to say, I've got to do these things to keep my younger sibling alive, because I know my parents aren't going to come back for, and sometimes it's days on end. And so with the children we had in our care, some of them as young as 4 and 5 had been in 12, 15, sometimes 20 different placements in the first 4 years of their life. So the concept of a mother and father, the concept of a home, is completely foreign to them. The first day they move in, they're calling you mum and dad, and you say to yourself, well, gee, they've blended in very well. They're already calling me mum and dad. It hasn't even been 24 hours, but they look at mum and dad like a position, like a job title, for instance. So you're the senior person in the house, so to speak. I call you mum, I call you dad. It's not a you are my...
Like an emotional attachment.
Yeah, there's no emotional or psychological attachment. There's absolutely no trust there. And not only is there no emotion, there's no love, there's no trust. There's actually a brick wall that obviously takes years of love, care, stability to break down that brick wall before you can build up the relationship and have that trust there. So that's the challenge that almost all foster carers face, and it was something that we experienced as well as a family. The children, back to my previous point, our children made it a lot easier. Like, we had children through the foster care system that were of comparable age with our own biological children, and that made the other children that came into our house, and they were from a variety of different ethnic groups. Some were Indigenous. We had both boys and girls, children as young as 10, 12 months, some as old as 7 or 8. And so right across that spectrum, just having other children in the house made it a lot easier, but they did have those specific challenges of how do I, they had a challenge of how do I settle into this house, because I know I'm only here for a short period of time, or the ones that we had for longer periods, they had those issues that we spoke about before, that sort of survival mode that, yes, I'm being told I'm going to be here for long term, but I've been told that before and that hasn't eventuated. So they've got in their mind, while I've been told I'm going to be here long term, I'm not going to open myself up emotionally or and build a relationship with these
Wow.
people, because then I just get hurt again. So these are and often we don't have, whether it's the Department of Health and Human Services, whether it's you as a foster carer, whether it's a foster care agency which assists with the placement, provides ongoing support. A lot of the time that history isn't there that you can look at and see what this child's life's been. Often you have a very sparse record, or sometimes even a blank page of their history. You don't know what they've been through, and so you're just trying to pick up whatever pieces you can and try to provide that loving home for those children.
All right, we're about to go to a break now. You're watching Nat Chat. Stay with us. We'll be back with more very shortly. Hello and welcome back to Nat Chat. I'm Mirella Rich and our guest is Daniel Attard. We're just talking about his experience with fostering children at the moment. Welcome back to the program, Daniel.
Thank you.
Now, when we were talking about your fostering children, and also you're involved in politics and everything as well, but how did you manage? You already had 4 children of your own, and your wife is homeschooling them as well, and you took on more children. Like at one point there was a sick baby, and then there was other 2 children. You had to take them to school and back and forth and everything. Just tell us a little bit how you managed through that time.
It does become a logistical challenge, to say the least. I guess organisation is the key, for want of a better term. But the key is, for those that are fostering or thinking of doing fostering, it's having that relationship with the foster care agency, and the foster care agency providing the support that they need to. And if I'm going to be frank, that always doesn't happen. That sometimes information on the children can be lacking, or things such as enrolling them in school, because you're not the guardian of you're not the legal guardian of those children. The Department of Health and Human Services is. So getting forms signed off, things that you would take for granted for your own children, taking them to the doctor, giving them medication, enrolling them in school, signing a permission form for them to go on an excursion. It's these things that do add another level of complexity to, as we discussed before, what is already a complex and at times a volatile relationship with all the different parties involved. But so if we get those logistics right, it's never an easy journey, but it can be easier to manage that. Again, it's educating the children to, like we used to say to our children, look, we're having some other children come and stay with us for a certain period of time. Yes, what we need from you, what we expect from you, is that you sort of do your chores, do whatever needs to be done around the house, and it's that education process. And that's a great opportunity to help skill the children up and give them the everyday skills they need for daily life.
Wow, and how do your children respond, your biological children respond when the foster care children come?
That's probably the greatest challenge about having your own biological children and having foster children coming in, is the different standards, if I can put it that way. And what I mean by that is, often because these children have come from a traumatic background, they've often seen violence, they've seen antisocial behaviour, swearing, aggressive demeanours, and you have to be aware of that for children coming into the system, especially those for older than 4 or 5.
Yeah,
so
influencing your own children.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but and it's not just the negative influence on your biological children. It's trying to explain to your children that yes, we have standards of behaviour in our house, and this is what my wife and I, and I guess all foster carers struggle with, where you have certain behaviours that you expect from your children, or other behaviours that aren't allowed in your household, that then you try to correct that behaviour in the foster children when they perform it. But it's a delicate balancing act that you can't simply say no or punish them or anything like that, because you're aware of their traumatic background, but your children aren't. So it's an education process saying to your children, no, we don't allow that behaviour. Yes, the other children did, through a child's lens, yes, they did get away with it without being punished or something, but this is why we sort of allowed it to go on to a degree. But you also use that as a challenge or as a opportunity to correct that behaviour in children that are coming into your care, especially the longer term ones. There's a very limited capacity what you can do for short term placements, but for longer term placements, absolutely you can. So for every challenge, there's an opportunity on the same side. So yes,
I guess you would need a lot of patience and tolerance and a big heart to be able to do that, like to already have children and then bring other children in as well to your family, and try and educate them in a positive way as well.
Oh, absolutely. Like you certainly don't do it for the financial reward. While the government does give you limited help, and I stress limited, you are doing it because you say to yourself, and this is a conversation my wife and I had, that it's that old adage, biblical adage, I might add, that for those that have been given more shall be expected. So my wife and I live a reasonably comfortable life. We've got a stable home, so she's home full time. She's providing full time care and nurturing and love to our children. And we said to ourselves, we've got that capacity to extend that beyond the realms of our family. So that's a conversation we had, and we decided to do that. And that's a conversation that only families can have in and of themselves. No one can sort of impose it on you, or sort of pressure you or guilt you into making a decision like that. It does add a great deal of stress. There are challenges. One of the biggest hurdles, again, is getting through that government bureaucracy, navigating the system. Again, it's just having that relationship with the foster care agency, the Department of Health and Human Services, that takes care of the logistical side, but just trying to build up that relationship with the children, and as much as hard as it can be, a bitter pill to swallow, some children are sort of so far dug into themselves that it would be very hard to get that reciprocal love back as a parent, or back from a child to you as a parent, as a foster carer. And not having that love come back the other way is often too much for some parents, and they give up the foster care as such.
It's a hard job. I mean, you need to be a certain type of person to be able to do that, and to be able to commit to this long, it will depend how long you did it for, but say if you're doing it for long term, to commit to really helping to this child to grow and to feel loved and feel secure in the world again. I mean, it would be lovely for a lot of people who can't have children if they could do this, and they could throw themselves into it. It would be so wonderful, because they want children, and these children want parents who love them. So it would be such a good thing if it would work out that way.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's a topic for another day, but we speak about across all governments about increasing the exit pathways, like permanent ones such as adoption for children, but it's something that we'll have to discuss later on.
Yep, you have to come on again. Thank you so much for coming on the program, Daniel.
It was a pleasure.
It's been wonderful having you here.
Thank you.
You've been watching Nat Chat. I'm Mirella Rich, and our guest was Daniel Attard. I hope you enjoyed the program, and we'll see you again soon.